A routine shift became a royal emergency. Royal guards locked the wing instantly, emotional tale. His calm nature, steady hands, and warm smile had earned him respect not only from his colleagues, but also from the patients he cared for. Every night, when he walked through the sliding glass doors of the hospital, he felt a familiar rhythm settle over him. The soft hum of the fluorescent lights, the faint smell of antiseptic, and the quiet murmur of monitors gave him a sense of order, a sense that he was exactly where he needed to be. This night, like many others, began with a routine briefing. The day staff handed over detailed notes about the patients, who needed medication, who required special attention, and which rooms were particularly quiet or restless. John listened carefully, taking mental notes as he walked from bed to bed in the wing. He knew that even the smallest detail mattered. A patient's comfort could change the course of their recovery, and he prided himself on noticing the details others might miss. As he walked down the corridor, he greeted the night staff with a nod or a soft good evening. He passed by room 212, where an elderly woman was recovering from surgery. She smiled weakly at him, her eyes lighting up with recognition. "Hello, John," she whispered. "It feels safer when you're around." John smiled back, squeezing her hand gently. It was moments like these that reminded him why he had chosen this career, the ability to offer reassurance, comfort, and care when it was needed most. He continued his rounds, checking on patients who had been admitted earlier in the day. One room had a young boy who had fractured his arm after a minor accident. He was anxious about the cast and the discomfort it caused. John sat beside him, speaking softly, explaining what to expect and distracting him with light jokes and stories. The boy's tension eased, and a smile broke through his worry. John felt a familiar warmth spread through him, knowing he had made a difference in someone's night. The wing was unusually quiet that evening. Occasionally, the distant echo of footsteps or the soft beeping of a heart monitor punctuated the silence. John moved efficiently, checking vitals, ensuring that medications were administered on time, and adjusting beds for comfort. It was a rhythm he had perfected over the years, a combination of routine and intuition. Yet, despite his experience, there was always a sense of alertness. Hospitals had a way of changing in an instant, of turning calm into chaos in a single moment, and John knew this better than anyone. He paused for a moment by the nurse's station, sipping the lukewarm coffee he had brought with him. The night staff gathered around, chatting quietly about the day's events, sharing small jokes, and offering each other words of encouragement. These moments of camaraderie were important. They reminded everyone that they were not alone in their demanding work, that there was support and understanding among those who shared the same responsibilities. John joined in briefly, laughing softly at a colleague's story, before returning to his rounds. As he moved further down the corridor, he noticed a new patient being wheeled into the wing. A young woman, her face pale but composed, was guided carefully by two attendants. She didn't speak much, but her eyes held a quiet determination, a strength that intrigued John. He introduced himself softly, explaining the routine procedures, and offered reassurance. Her slight nod of appreciation was enough to encourage him. Even small gestures mattered in moments like these. John's mind wandered briefly to his own family. He thought about his wife, who worked part-time at a nearby clinic, and their young daughter, who was probably asleep by now. He missed the home comforts sometimes, but he loved his work. He often told himself that the hours, the tiredness, and the occasional long nights were a small price to pay for the ability to help others when they were most vulnerable. His work was not glamorous, and it rarely made headlines, but it was meaningful in a way few other professions could match. Around midnight, John's shift settled into a steady pattern. He moved from room to room, checking on patients, updating charts, and coordinating with doctors. He reminded himself to take small breaks, knowing that exhaustion could affect his judgment. A calm sense of focus had enveloped him. Every action was deliberate, every step measured. He felt the comforting predictability of a routine night, the kind that allowed him to anticipate needs before they arose. The hospital's quiet was punctuated by occasional emergencies, a monitor alarm here, a patient calling out there, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary. John handled each situation calmly, efficiently, and with compassion. He noticed when a patient shivered under a blanket, when another needed a glass of water, and when a young mother needed a gentle word of encouragement while tending to her sick child. These small acts, he believed, were the threads that held the hospital together, creating an environment of trust, safety, and care. At one point, John found himself in the lounge, glancing at the clock on the wall. Time seemed to pass differently at night. Hours could stretch endlessly, yet minutes could vanish in the flurry of attending to patients' needs. He took a deep breath, letting the calm of the night wash over him. He reflected on how his life had intertwined with the hospital over the years, how each night brought stories, challenges, and moments of quiet triumph. And then, just as he was preparing to check on the final set of rooms before a short break, a subtle change in the atmosphere caught his attention. The quiet that had defined the wing all evening now felt charged, almost electric. John's intuition, honed over years of experience, told him that something was about to happen. But at that moment, he had no idea that the ordinary night ahead of him would soon transform into a situation unlike anything he had ever faced. A night where routine would give way to urgency, where calm would be replaced by high alert, and where every decision would carry a weight he had never known before. John continued his rounds, unaware that this routine shift would soon become the backdrop for an extraordinary story, one that would test his skills, his composure, and his compassion in ways he had never imagined. For now, he moved quietly through the corridors, offering comfort, checking vitals, and maintaining the delicate balance that made a hospital wing not just a place of medicine, but a sanctuary for those in need. As John Matthews made his final rounds, a sudden vibration from his pocket made him pause. It was a notification from the hospital's internal alert system. At first, he thought it was routine, a reminder or a minor update, but the message was different. The words blinked on the small screen. All personnel remain in place. Royal Wing lockdown effective immediately. John blinked. He read it again, trying to make sense of it. The words felt surreal. Royal Wing lockdown, he muttered quietly to himself. He had been through emergencies before, critical patients, equipment malfunctions, and even occasional code blues, but he had never seen a lockdown specifically for the Royal Wing. A sense of unease stirred inside him. Before he could process the message fully, footsteps echoed down the corridor. Heavy, deliberate steps. The metallic click of polished boots against the floor sent a shiver down his spine. John looked up and saw uniformed guards moving with precision, forming a human barrier at every entrance to the wing. Their expressions were serious, their eyes alert, scanning every corner of the corridor. They moved with an authority that brooked no questions. "Everyone, please remain where you are," one of the guards instructed firmly, his voice steady but urgent. "This is a security protocol. No one enters or leaves." The staff exchanged confused glances. Nurses whispered to each other, doctors hurriedly checked their pagers, and even the seasoned night personnel seemed momentarily unsettled. John took a deep breath, reminding himself to stay calm. Panic would only make things worse. He had learned long ago that in moments of unexpected stress, composure and focus could mean the difference between order and chaos. John walked quickly to the nurse's station, scanning the alert system for more information. A small note appeared on the screen: "Royal patient in critical condition. Full security and medical protocols initiated." His heart skipped a beat. A royal patient. That explained the guards and the lockdown, but the lack of details only heightened the tension. He knew that in such situations, every second mattered, and rumors could be dangerous if not handled carefully. He returned to his rounds, moving deliberately from room to room. The patients, sensing the sudden change in atmosphere, looked up with curiosity and concern. John offered gentle reassurances, explaining in calm, simple words that everything was under control. "It's just a special situation," he said. "We're going to take care of everyone. You're safe here." His voice was steady, but inside, a part of him was already preparing for the unknown. The corridor was alive with quiet energy. Nurses moved efficiently, doctors checked charts and vital signs, and technicians monitored machines closely. The usual calm of the night had shifted into a focused alertness. Every action seemed slightly more intense, as if everyone sensed that the ordinary rules of the night had been suspended. John noticed that the new patient he had met earlier, the young woman, seemed unusually anxious. Her eyes flicked toward the guards repeatedly, and her hands fidgeted in her lap. John knelt beside her, offering a comforting smile. "It's okay," he said softly. "They're just here to make sure everyone stays safe. Nothing is wrong with you." She nodded slightly, taking comfort in his presence. It was a small interaction, but it reinforced John's role not just as a caregiver, but as someone who could calm fear in others, even in tense situations. Meanwhile, the guards moved with quiet efficiency, positioning themselves at strategic points along the hallways. They checked identification, confirmed access rights, and communicated in short, precise phrases. Their presence was both reassuring and intimidating. John had never worked in an environment where security was so immediate and intense. It was clear that this was not a drill, and the stakes were higher than anything he had encountered in his long career. As the minutes passed, John's attention shifted to the monitoring screens at the nurses' station. There were small movements in the royal wing, but very little information. The hospital administration had restricted communication, and only essential personnel were being briefed. John understood the necessity of this. In high-profile situations, privacy and discretion were crucial. Yet the uncertainty gnawed at him. What exactly was happening? How critical was the patient's condition? Every second that passed without clear answers increased the pressure. A soft alarm suddenly sounded from one of the patient rooms. John rushed over, heart pounding, and found that a monitor had detected a slight irregularity in one of the patient's readings. The team moved together seamlessly, checking vitals, adjusting medication, and reassuring the patient. It was a reminder that despite the royal emergency, the care of every patient remained important. John knew that the world might focus on the royal figure, but for him, every life mattered equally. Hours seemed to stretch in the tense atmosphere. The usual rhythm of the night had been replaced by a focused alertness. John moved methodically, checking charts, assisting doctors, and answering quiet questions from patients. He observed the staff's determination and professionalism, a testament to the culture of care that had been cultivated over years. Even in the face of an unprecedented lockdown, everyone continued to perform their duties with calm efficiency. At one point, John paused in the corridor near the royal wing. The heavy doors loomed ahead, guarded by two officers who blocked any unauthorized approach. John could see through a small glass window that the lights inside were bright, the equipment humming steadily. There was movement, but nothing he could interpret. The uncertainty weighed heavily on him. He knew that behind those doors, important lives, were being balanced on delicate medical decisions, and that his colleagues were part of a team responsible for outcomes that could never be taken lightly. The emotional strain of the situation became apparent. Even the most experienced nurses and doctors showed signs of tension, tightened jaws, furrowed brows, and occasional whispered consultations. John reminded himself to stay steady, offering words of encouragement whenever he could. "We're a team," he said quietly to a fellow nurse. "We've handled emergencies before. Let's just focus on what we can control." Time moved differently during emergencies. Minutes could feel like hours, and small actions carried extraordinary weight. John found himself moving with heightened awareness, anticipating needs before they were voiced, stepping in quietly to assist, and maintaining a calm demeanor that inspired confidence in others. He understood that leadership wasn't always about authority. Sometimes it was about presence, reassurance, and the quiet ability to keep the situation from spiraling into fear or confusion. By the early hours of the morning, the first signs of updates began to trickle in. A senior nurse returned from the royal wing briefly, giving John and the team a discreet nod of acknowledgement. He didn't speak much, but his expression conveyed urgency and cautious optimism. John knew that this was a pivotal moment. The situation was still critical, but the team's efforts were having an effect. Throughout it all, John reflected on the unpredictability of his profession. One moment, a night could be calm and predictable. The next, it could demand every ounce of skill, patience, and emotional strength he possessed. He thought about the young patients he had cared for, the anxious families he had reassured, and the colleagues he had relied on. Each of these experiences had prepared him for nights like this, when routine and chaos intersected in ways that tested the very core of a caregiver's resolve. The tension was not just professional but personal. John felt the weight of responsibility deeply. Every decision he made, every action he took, had potential consequences. Yet he also felt a quiet pride in being part of a team capable of rising to such challenges. The calm efficiency of the staff, the precision of the guards, and the resilience of the patients all contributed to a sense that, despite the unknowns, they were in capable hands. As the night progressed, John's awareness of time faded. Hours passed in a blur of rounds, monitoring, and quiet coordination. Every sound, every movement carried significance. The ordinary had given way to the extraordinary, and John understood that this night would be remembered not for its chaos, but for the quiet professionalism and human compassion that defined every action in the Royal Wing lockdown. By the time dawn approached, the first hints of daylight filtered through the hospital windows. The intensity of the night had not diminished, but there was a subtle shift, a sense that the immediate crisis was under careful control, that the collective efforts of staff and security were stabilizing the situation. John paused for a moment, taking a deep breath, reflecting on the strange, intense journey of a single night that had started as ordinary but had quickly become unforgettable. The night had grown heavier with quiet tension. John Matthews moved down the hallways, his mind focused yet alert, but he could no longer ignore the weight of the human side of the crisis. Behind the locked doors of the Royal Wing, a life was at stake, and everyone outside could feel the invisible tension pressing down. It was one thing to maintain order and efficiency. It was another to grasp the emotional currents swirling through the staff and families waiting in anxious anticipation. John paused for a moment near a window overlooking the hospital courtyard. The early morning air was cool, carrying with it the distant sounds of the city that seemed almost indifferent to the intensity within these walls. He leaned against the ledge, closed his eyes briefly, and let out a slow breath. In moments like these, he often reflected on the human stories that intersected with his own, stories of pain, hope, fear, and resilience. He thought about the patient inside, about the people waiting, and about his own role in this extraordinary night. Returning to his rounds, John encountered a small group of hospital staff gathered quietly in a corner, speaking in hushed tones. They had just received word from the senior nurse who had briefed him earlier. The royal patient was still in critical condition, but the immediate threat had been stabilized. There was relief in the room, but it was mixed with exhaustion and worry. John joined the group, offering a reassuring smile. We've done everything we can so far. Let's stay focused and keep supporting each other, he said softly. His words seemed to settle the group, if only slightly. John understood that leadership in moments of high emotion was less about commands and more about presence. Sometimes a calm voice, a steady hand, or a simple acknowledgement of effort could be enough to restore balance. The staff returned to their duties, their movements efficient but tempered with a new awareness of the emotional stakes. Meanwhile, family members of the royal patient had been allowed limited contact under strict supervision. John noticed their quiet pacing, their hands gripping chairs or each other's arms in anxious anticipation. Though he had cared for many families over the years, he had rarely seen such intense, silent concern. He approached them gently, offering small words of reassurance. "They are in excellent care," he said. "The team is highly experienced, and we're doing everything possible." One of the family members gave him a brief nod of appreciation, tears glinting in their eyes. John felt the familiar weight of responsibility pressing on him, the knowledge that his words, like his actions, could offer solace in moments of fear. Inside the wing, the medical team continued their delicate work. John could hear faint conversations and the rhythmic beeping of monitors through the walls. Each sound carried significance: a rise or drop in heart rate, the adjustment of medication, the careful coordination between doctors and nurses. John watched the staff outside, noting the quiet determination and focused attention that mirrored what he imagined was happening inside. He knew that even though he was not directly in the room with the royal patient, his role in supporting the team, maintaining order and managing logistics, was equally vital. At one point, John found himself sitting in a quiet corner, jotting down notes about patient care and upcoming tasks. The act of writing, of organizing thoughts, gave him a sense of control amidst the uncertainty. It reminded him that even in the midst of chaos, structure and preparation could create a semblance of stability. He glanced at the clock. Hours had passed since the lockdown began, and yet the night felt like it was stretching endlessly. Time seemed suspended in a way that only true emergencies could create. John reflected on the human stories behind each patient he had cared for that night. The young boy with the fractured arm, the elderly woman recovering from surgery, the anxious young woman, each story was a thread in the tapestry of the hospital's life. Now the royal emergency had added another, extraordinary thread, one that demanded every ounce of focus, empathy, and resilience he possessed. He understood that emergencies were not just about medical procedures. They were about people, their emotions, and the fragile connections that held a sense of normalcy in place. A sudden movement near the nurse's station drew John's attention. A junior nurse looked pale, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched a chart. John approached her, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. "Take a breath," he said gently. "We've got this. Just focus on one thing at a time." She nodded, visibly calming as she regained her composure. John realized that emotional support among staff was just as important as medical skill during moments like these. Fear and anxiety could spread quickly, but reassurance and solidarity could contain it, allowing everyone to function at their best. Throughout the night, the royal wing had become a focal point of whispered curiosity and quiet observation. Staff and guards moved in careful choreography, each aware of the immense responsibility resting on their shoulders. John observed the guards, noting the way they coordinated silently, their eyes constantly scanning, ready to respond to any change. There was an unspoken tension between the world inside the royal wing and the staff outside, a tension that everyone had learned to navigate with patience, respect, and discipline. As the early morning light began to filter through the high windows, John noticed a subtle shift in atmosphere. The immediate danger had been managed, but the situation remained critical. The royal patient's condition had stabilized enough to allow a careful monitoring approach, yet there was no room for complacency. John moved among the staff, checking equipment, offering guidance and quietly observing. His presence, calm and steady, seemed to anchor the team. He understood that in moments like this, emotional composure could be just as life-saving as medical expertise. During a brief pause, John stepped aside to reflect. He thought about his career, about the countless nights he had worked in hospitals, and about the unique pressures of caring for patients whose lives were under public scrutiny. The royal emergency was unlike anything he had faced before, yet the principles remained the same: focus, compassion, and attention to detail. Every action mattered. Every word mattered. Every calm breath could ripple through the room and influence outcomes in subtle but powerful ways. At this point, John also considered the families again. Watching them from a distance, he realized how much their well-being depended on the staff's ability to remain composed. Fear and anxiety were contagious, but so was calm and confidence. By staying grounded, he could help alleviate some of the emotional weight pressing down on those waiting outside. He moved among them quietly, offering small gestures of reassurance, a nod, a gentle word, a shared smile. These moments, he understood, were part of the unspoken care that extended beyond medical procedures. Suddenly, a soft but urgent signal came from the royal wing. John and the senior nurse exchanged a quick glance. The moment had come to prepare for a critical intervention. Every member of the team sprang into action, their movements precise and coordinated. John assisted silently, handing instruments, confirming details, and ensuring that protocols were followed without error. The weight of responsibility was heavy, but the sense of purpose was even heavier. This was what he had trained for, what he had worked for, and what he had committed himself to as a professional caregiver. The hours that followed were tense, demanding complete attention. John observed the staff, noting their unwavering focus, the subtle exchanges of reassurance, and the way each action was performed with care and precision. Even in the midst of extraordinary pressure, the human element remained central: compassion, patience, empathy. These were as crucial as the medical procedures being carried out inside the locked wing. As the morning progressed, there were small signs of progress. Monitors showed stable readings, brief smiles appeared on exhausted faces, and the tension in the hallways eased slightly. John allowed himself a moment of quiet satisfaction. The royal patient was still in critical condition, but the immediate threat had been managed. It was a reminder that perseverance, skill, and humanity could prevail even in the most stressful circumstances. By mid-morning, John's mind turned toward reflection. The night had tested him, challenged him, and reminded him of why he had chosen this career. It was not just about medical knowledge or technical skill. It was about being human in moments when humanity was most needed. The royal emergency had shown him that heroism could be quiet, measured, and compassionate. It could be expressed in calm words, steady hands, and a willingness to share the emotional burden with those around him. The calm that had settled over the hospital wing for a brief moment was suddenly replaced by heightened urgency. John Matthews sensed it immediately. A soft but insistent alarm echoed from the royal wing, barely audible yet commanding attention. The medical team outside stiffened, exchanging sharp, brief glances. Though the doors remained closed and guarded, the tension inside seemed to spill into the corridors. This was the moment where every decision, every action, and every second mattered. John moved swiftly toward the nurse's station, coordinating quietly with colleagues. He checked the status on monitors, confirmed equipment readiness, and ensured that supplies were in place. His years of experience had taught him that preparation was as important as immediate action. Even small delays could ripple into complications, and in situations involving critical patients, precision was not optional. It was life-saving. Inside the royal wing, the medical team was working at full capacity. Doctors and nurses moved in a careful, synchronized rhythm, adjusting machines, monitoring vital signs, and administering treatment with meticulous attention. Though John could not see the details, he could feel the gravity of the situation through the rapid pace of staff movement and the silent intensity of the guards stationed at every entrance. John's role, though outside the immediate room, was no less critical. He coordinated communication between the inner team and those monitoring other patients in the wing. He made sure that the doctors had what they needed within seconds, and that no step of the protocol was overlooked. Every instrument, every medication, every note on a chart had to be perfect. In emergencies like this, human error was not a possibility, and John carried that understanding deeply. As minutes ticked by, the pressure mounted. A subtle shift in the monitors indicated that the royal patient's condition had become unstable again. John felt a surge of adrenaline, but he kept his composure. He moved efficiently, assisting colleagues, confirming data, and quietly guiding the less experienced nurses. His calm presence was a stabilizing force. Even those with years of experience looked to him for reassurance, recognizing his steady demeanor amidst the whirlwind of tension. Outside the royal wing, the hospital staff worked silently but deliberately. They knew that the unfolding events were extraordinary. The usual flow of patients, rounds, and paperwork had been interrupted, replaced by a singular focus on the emergency inside. John guided the team with quiet authority, offering brief but meaningful instructions. Check the oxygen supply, make sure the monitors are calibrated. Stay calm, we're managing this. His voice was firm but gentle, carrying a sense of both urgency and reassurance. The hours seemed to stretch into a strange, suspended reality. Time became less about minutes or hours and more about critical actions and patient responses. John moved from station to station, anticipating needs before they were voiced, assisting in calculations, adjusting equipment, and ensuring that everyone had the support they required. He understood that emergencies were as much about teamwork and communication as they were about medical skill. At one point, a junior nurse approached, her hands trembling as she held a tray of instruments. John placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You've got this," he said softly. "Just focus on one step at a time." She nodded, her hands steadying as she followed his instructions. John knew that supporting each other emotionally was just as vital as the medical interventions being carried out. Fear and tension could compromise focus, but calm guidance could restore confidence instantly. Inside the royal wing, the patient's condition remained delicate. Every slight change in vital signs required immediate attention. The medical team adjusted doses, repositioned the patient, and monitored responses with extreme care. The intensity was palpable even to those stationed outside the doors. John kept meticulous notes, ensuring that nothing was missed, nothing delayed. His mind raced with protocols, procedures, and contingencies, yet his outward demeanor remained composed. The guards stationed outside moved with quiet precision, coordinating with hospital security and maintaining absolute control over access points. Their presence was both a reassurance and a reminder of the gravity of the situation. John had never worked in a setting with such concentrated authority and discipline, yet he respected the need for it. Their efficiency allowed him and the medical team to focus fully on the patient, without distraction or interruption. As the morning progressed, a subtle change brought a glimmer of hope. The monitors indicated stabilization, though the patient remained in critical condition. John allowed himself a moment to acknowledge the effort of the team. Every action, every calculation, and every moment of focus had contributed to this fragile improvement. Yet he knew there was no time for celebration. Emergencies of this magnitude were unpredictable, and vigilance was essential until the situation was fully secure. Amidst the technical and procedural focus, the human element remained central. John observed the staff, noting the way they offered silent support to each other, exchanged brief nods of reassurance, and maintained communication with families outside. Even in the midst of extraordinary pressure, empathy and compassion were as essential as precision. John understood that the strength of the team lay not just in skill, but in their ability to remain humane under extreme stress. By mid-morning, John found himself coordinating multiple tasks simultaneously. He ensured that medication schedules were updated, that vital signs were tracked meticulously, and that the team inside the royal wing had uninterrupted access to every necessary resource. The delicate balance between technical skill and human care was evident in every decision he made. Every small act, handing an instrument, confirming a reading, offering a calm word, was a thread woven into the larger tapestry of life-saving work. Suddenly, another alert signaled a minor complication. John's attention snapped to the monitors. The patient's blood pressure had dropped slightly, and the team inside immediately adjusted treatment. John assisted by double-checking equipment and confirming protocols, ensuring that every adjustment was executed flawlessly. The room outside the royal wing buzzed with controlled energy, each person hyper-focused on their task. John felt a deep sense of responsibility, tempered by professional confidence. He knew that moments like these defined careers, tested resolve, and revealed character. The challenge was immense, but so was the satisfaction of contributing to life-saving efforts. He reflected on the countless nights he had spent caring for patients in less public circumstances, realizing that the principles remained the same: attention, empathy, preparation, and calm in the face of uncertainty. Hours passed, and the morning light grew brighter. The immediate danger had lessened, yet the intensity of the situation had left an indelible mark. John moved deliberately among the staff, quietly acknowledging their efforts, offering encouragement, and ensuring that nothing was overlooked. The hospital wing was a symphony of human care, discipline, and coordination, each person playing a vital part in maintaining stability during an extraordinary event. Finally, as mid-morning approached, the patient's condition showed consistent improvement. The monitors reflected steady vitals, and the team inside allowed themselves cautious relief. John exchanged a brief look with the senior nurse. There was a sense of achievement, not loud or celebratory, but deeply human. They had faced a crisis, responded with skill and compassion, and emerged with hope. John allowed himself a moment of reflection. The night had been long, tense, and emotionally demanding. Yet it had also revealed the strength of the human spirit, the ability to remain focused, calm, and compassionate in the face of extraordinary challenges. He thought about the patients, the families, and the team, recognizing that each person had played a role in turning a critical situation into one of cautious optimism. As the lockdown slowly lifted, the guards remained vigilant, but the tension in the corridors eased. Staff moved with quiet relief, exchanging nods and whispered words of congratulations. John, exhausted but composed, felt the profound satisfaction of knowing that the efforts of the night had made a real difference. Every small act, every calm word, and every careful decision had contributed to the patient's survival. He paused outside the royal wing, taking a deep breath. The experience had been extraordinary, a test of skill, patience, and humanity. The night had started as routine, but it had transformed into a profound lesson in responsibility, resilience, and compassion. John realized that while emergencies could arrive without warning, the qualities that defined a caregiver, empathy, focus, and calm, were always within reach, ready to guide actions in the moments that mattered most. The early afternoon sunlight streamed through the hospital. Windows, soft and warm, contrasting sharply with the intensity of the night that had just passed. John Matthews walked slowly through the corridors, feeling the weight of exhaustion settle into his shoulders. His body ached, and his mind buzzed with memories of the long hours he had just endured. Yet beneath the tiredness, there was a quiet sense of accomplishment, a feeling that he had been part of something far greater than a routine night shift. The lockdown of the royal wing had been lifted, but the atmosphere remained charged with the residue of tension. Staff moved with careful calm, tidying up equipment, updating charts, and exchanging brief words of relief. John paused at the nurse's station, looking around at the faces of his colleagues. There was pride there, but also the lingering fatigue that comes from facing extraordinary circumstances together. He realized once again that emergencies did not just test skill, they tested character, empathy, and teamwork. John took a deep breath and reflected on the events of the past hours. It had begun as any other night, a routine set of rounds and patient care. But within moments, it had transformed into a high-stakes situation that demanded every ounce of focus and calm he could muster. The royal patient's sudden critical condition had created a whirlwind of urgency, protocols, and heightened security. Guards had appeared, doors had been locked, and the usual rhythm of the wing had been replaced with intense precision and silent coordination. He remembered the first moments of confusion, the strange alert on the hospital system, the sudden appearance of uniformed guards, the whispers and anxious glances among staff. For a brief moment, John had felt the familiar disorientation that accompanies unexpected events. Yet instinctively he had found his rhythm, moving through the chaos with methodical care, ensuring that patients were safe, equipment was ready, and communication remained clear. It was a lesson he had learned over years of experience. In moments of crisis, calm action could prevent panic and focus could save lives. Walking past the windows of the royal wing, John could see the team inside moving with precision, though the intensity had softened slightly. The patient's vitals had stabilized, and while continued monitoring was necessary, the worst of the crisis had passed. The sight brought him relief, but also a profound respect for the people working inside. Doctors, nurses, and support staff had coordinated seamlessly, blending technical skill with human care in a way that few could fully appreciate. John felt proud to be part of a team that could operate at such a level under extraordinary pressure. He reflected on the families who had waited anxiously outside. They had been allowed brief updates, always carefully managed to balance transparency and privacy. John had seen the mixture of relief and residual worry in their eyes, the silent gratitude for those who had been at the patient's side, and the overwhelming respect for the staff who had performed with such calm and efficiency. It struck him how deeply people's emotions were intertwined with medical care, and how essential empathy and reassurance were in moments of fear. John also thought about the smaller moments of human connection throughout the night. The young boy with the fractured arm, the elderly woman recovering from surgery, and the anxious young woman, all had sought comfort in simple gestures, a reassuring word, a gentle touch, a calm presence. These moments had reminded him that caregiving was not just about procedures or machines, it was about humanity. Even in the shadow of a royal emergency, the ordinary acts of kindness and attentiveness mattered profoundly. By mid-afternoon, John had returned to the staff lounge briefly to rest and reflect. The room was quiet, the usual hum of conversation subdued as everyone processed the events of the night. He sipped a cup of lukewarm coffee, letting the familiar taste anchor him back to a sense of normalcy. Around him, colleagues exchanged quiet comments, small smiles, and gestures of camaraderie. There was pride, exhaustion, relief, and an unspoken bond forged in the heat of crisis. John realized that experiences like this shaped the core of a hospital team: resilience, compassion, and the ability to rise together in moments of extreme need. As he walked through the corridors again, he noticed patients going about their day, some still resting, others speaking with staff or family members. For them, the night had been experienced differently, some unaware of the extraordinary events that had unfolded, others sensing the heightened energy and concern without fully understanding why. John found comfort in this contrast. Life went on, the hospital continued its work, and despite the chaos, care remained constant. It reminded him that even extraordinary events were part of a larger, ongoing story of human resilience and compassion. John paused at a small courtyard within the hospital. The sunlight bathed the space in warmth, and he leaned against the stone railing, reflecting on the lessons of the night. Emergencies could arrive without warning, demanding skills, patience, and empathy in ways that routine work could not prepare anyone for entirely. Yet it was in these moments that true character was revealed, the ability to remain calm, to act decisively, and to care deeply even when under pressure. He thought of his colleagues, each of whom had displayed quiet heroism, and felt a profound respect for the collective strength of the team. His thoughts drifted back to the royal patient, now stable but still under careful observation. The stakes had been high and the pressure unrelenting, yet the night had ended with hope. John understood that emergencies did not always conclude neatly, and that continued vigilance was necessary. Still, the stabilization marked a turning point, a moment where intense effort, precision, and empathy had converged to protect a life. It was a powerful reminder of why he had chosen this career, a profession where human skill and heart combined to make real, tangible differences. Walking back into the main wing, John was greeted by quiet expressions of gratitude from staff and brief nods of acknowledgement from family members still present. There were no grand celebrations, no fanfare, only the soft, human recognition of effort well done. John understood that this was the essence of care, the quiet, steady work that saved lives and comforted souls. He smiled softly, feeling both relief and a renewed sense of purpose. As the day progressed, normal operations began to resume. The hospital corridors, though still carrying the residue of tension, gradually returned to their usual rhythm. Equipment was tidied, charts updated, and patients attended to as routine care resumed. Yet the memory of the royal emergency lingered, a reminder that even the most ordinary shifts could transform into extraordinary experiences requiring courage, focus, and compassion. John took one last round through the wing, checking on patients, offering a word of comfort, and ensuring that the transition back to normalcy was smooth. Each interaction, no matter how small, reinforced the importance of presence and attentiveness. The extraordinary events of the night had illuminated the deeper purpose of his work, to provide care, comfort, and stability in moments of uncertainty, and to do so with unwavering humanity. As he finally left the wing, the weight of the night lifted slowly from his shoulders. The sunlight outside felt warmer, the air lighter, and the world seemed momentarily still. John knew that he would carry the memory of this night for the rest of his life, not as a source of stress, but as a reminder of what it meant to serve, to care, and to remain steadfast when lives depended on it. The ordinary had become extraordinary, and in that transformation, he had witnessed the best of human skill and compassion. John walked toward the exit, reflecting on the profound lessons he had learned. Emergencies could arrive unexpectedly, challenges could stretch the limits of endurance, and fear could surface even in the most composed individuals. Yet in those moments, courage, empathy, and professionalism could prevail. He thought about the quiet heroism of every nurse, doctor, and support staff member, as well as the disciplined vigilance of the guards. Together, they had navigated the storm, and their combined effort had preserved life and dignity. Pausing at the hospital doors, John looked back one last time. The wing, now calm and orderly, seemed almost ordinary again, yet he knew that within its walls, lives had been preserved and humanity had been affirmed. He stepped outside into the sunlight, feeling the warmth on his face, the fresh air filling his lungs, and a deep sense of fulfillment settling over him. This night had reminded him that heroism often arrived quietly, in steady hands, calm voices, and compassionate hearts, in ways that left lasting impacts on both those who gave care and those who received it.